Sarah Martinez wiped down the counter at the beachside cafe for the third time that morning, her movements automatic after 2 years of working the breakfast shift. The early summer sun streamed through the large windows, casting golden rays across the wooden tables where tourists and locals alike gathered for their morning coffee and fresh pastries. At 24, Sarah had learned to keep her head down and her sleeves rolled up just enough to stay cool in the California heat, but not so much that her ink showed. The tattoo on her right forearm was intricate and meaningful to her, but she had discovered early on that not everyone appreciated body art, especially in the conservative beach town where she had moved to start fresh. The morning rush was beginning to wind down when 3 young men in expensive polo shirts and designer sunglasses strutted through the door. Sarah recognized the type immediately. College boys from wealthy families, probably home for summer break and looking for ways to entertain themselves at the expense of others. They settled into a corner booth, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear about their father's business connections and their expensive cars parked outside. Sarah approached their table with practiced professional smile, notepad ready. The July heat was already building, and she had unconsciously pushed her sleeves up slightly while working. The tattoo on her forearm was partially visible, intricate black lines forming what appeared to be a military insignia surrounded by detailed script. The tallest of the 3 boys, wearing a Princeton t-shirt, noticed immediately. He nudged his friends and pointed at Sarah's arm with a smirk. "Look at that," he said loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Another wannabe trying to look tough with fake military ink." His friend, a blond boy with perfectly styled hair, laughed. "Probably got it at some cheap parlor to impress guys. I bet she doesn't even know what it means." Sarah felt her cheeks burn, but she maintained her composure. She had dealt with comments before, though none quite so public or cruel. "What can I get you gentlemen this morning?" she asked, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. The 3rd boy, wearing Ray-Ban sunglasses indoors, leaned back in his chair with an air of superiority. "Actually, sweethearts, we're curious about your little military cosplay there." He gestured dismissively at her arm. "Did you think having some fake Navy SEAL tattoo would make you look badass? Because it just looks desperate." The cafe had grown quieter, other customers now stealing glances at the unfolding scene. Sarah felt exposed and vulnerable, standing there while these privileged young men made a spectacle of mocking her. She knew she could walk away, could ask her manager Tom to handle the table, but something inside her refused to back down. "It's not fake," she said quietly, but her voice carried in the suddenly silent cafe. This only seemed to amuse them more. The Princeton boy slapped the table, grinning widely. "Oh, this is rich. Are you seriously trying to tell us that you're some kind of special forces soldier? You work at a coffee shop? Sweetheart." "Look at her," the blonde added, gesturing dramatically. 5'4", maybe 120 pounds soaking wet. "Yeah, real Navy SEAL material right there." Sarah's hands tightened on her notepad. The tattoo they were mocking represented something more precious to her than they could possibly understand. It wasn't about looking tough or impressing anyone. It was about love, loss, and honoring a promise she had made to someone who could no longer speak for himself. "You have no idea what you're talking about," she said, her voice gaining strength. "And you have no right to judge something you know nothing about." The boy in sunglasses stood up now, clearly enjoying the attention he was drawing from other customers. "Oh, we hit a nerve. Come on, tell us the story. Did you find the design on Pinterest? Or maybe your ex-boyfriend was in the military and you thought getting matching tattoos would be romantic." Their laughter was cruel and sharp, cutting through the morning calm of the cafe. Sarah noticed several customers looking uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. She felt increasingly isolated, standing alone against their mockery while dozens of people watched. Tom, her manager, emerged from the kitchen wiping his hands on a towel. He was a kind man in his 50s, a former Marine himself, and Sarah could see the concern in his eyes as he took in the scene. But before he could intervene, the boy's attention shifted to him. "Hey, Pops," the Princeton boy called out. "Your employee here is claiming she's got a real military tattoo. Maybe you should tell her that stolen valor is actually illegal." Tom's expression darkened. But Sarah stepped forward before he could respond. She had endured enough. The pain these boys were causing brought back all the grief and trauma she had worked so hard to process over the past 2 years. "You want to know about stolen valor?" she said, her voice trembling not with fear now, but with suppressed emotion. "Stolen valor is when someone pretends to have earned something they haven't. When they lie about service they never gave or sacrifice they never made." The cafe was completely silent now. Even the espresso machine seemed to have quieted, as if the entire space was holding its breath. "This tattoo," Sarah continued, pulling up her sleeve to fully reveal the intricate design, "isn't about pretending to be something I'm not. It's about honoring someone who gave everything." The boys' smirks faltered slightly as they got a full view of the tattoo. It was far more detailed and professional than they had initially realized. The military insignia was precise and accurate, surrounded by script that was clearly meaningful rather than decorative, but they had gone too far to back down now, especially with an audience watching. The blond boy rallied first. "Nice story. But anyone can get a realistic-looking tattoo these days. The internet is full of military designs. Just because you paid for good artwork doesn't make it real." Sarah felt tears threatening, but she blinked them back. She had promised herself when she got the tattoo that she would never let anyone make her ashamed of it. The man it honored deserved better than her backing down from ignorant bullies. The morning sun continued to stream through the windows, but the warmth seemed to have left the room. Other customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly disturbed by the boys' behavior, but uncertain how to intervene. The scene had gone from uncomfortable to genuinely distressing, and Sarah could feel the weight of everyone's attention. Just as the confrontation seemed to be reaching a breaking point, the door chime rang again. Heavy footsteps crossed the threshold, and Sarah looked up to see a man entering the cafe. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of bearing that immediately commanded attention. His hair was short and neat, his clothes casual but perfectly pressed, and something about the way he carried himself suggested military training. The man paused just inside the door, taking in the scene before him. Sarah standing beside the table with her tattoo fully visible, the 3 boys looking smug and superior, and the uncomfortable tension filling the entire cafe. His dark eyes moved from person to person, quickly assessing the situation with the kind of tactical awareness that comes from years of serious training. The Princeton boy, oblivious to the change in atmosphere, was just warming up for another verbal attack on Sarah when the newcomer stepped forward. His movement was controlled and purposeful, covering the distance to their table in just a few strides. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but carrying an authority that immediately caught everyone's attention. "I couldn't help but notice the discussion about military tattoos." The boys looked up at him with the kind of casual disrespect they showed anyone they perceived as interrupting their entertainment. The blonde one gestured dismissively. "Yeah, well, we're just having some fun with the waitress here. She's trying to pass off some fake military ink as the real deal." The man's expression remained neutral, but Sarah caught something shifting in his eyes. He looked at her tattoo with the kind of focused attention that spoke of genuine knowledge and experience. "Is that so?" he said quietly, his gaze never leaving Sarah's arm. "And what exactly makes you think it's fake?" The newcomer's question hung in the air like a challenge. The 3 college boys exchanged glances, suddenly less certain of themselves in the presence of someone who clearly commanded respect. The Princeton boy straightened up, trying to maintain his earlier bravado. "Look, man, "We're just pointing out the obvious," he said, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "This girl is working at a coffee shop and trying to pass herself off as some kind of special forces operator. It's pretty clear she's just looking for attention." The stranger stepped closer to their table, and Sarah noticed the way he moved, balanced, controlled, with the kind of awareness that suggested he was always ready for anything. When he spoke, his voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath it. "I see, and you're qualified to make that determination how, exactly?" The blond boy laughed nervously. "Come on, look at her." "Does she look like Navy SEAL material to you? We're just calling out obvious stolen valor when we see it." "Stolen valor." The man repeated the words slowly, as if tasting them. "That's a serious accusation. It's actually a federal crime to falsely claim military service or decorations for personal gain. Are you certain that's what's happening here?" Sarah found herself studying this stranger who had stepped into her defense. There was something about him that reminded her painfully of someone else. The way he held himself, the careful precision of his words, the underlying strength that needed no demonstration. Her heart began beating faster, though she couldn't quite identify why. The boy in sunglasses had been quiet during this exchange, but now he leaned forward with renewed aggression. "Look, whoever you are. This isn't your business. We're just having a conversation with our waitress about her questionable life choices." Questionable life choices. The man's eyes shifted to Sarah's tattoo again, and this time he stepped closer to get a better look. Sarah instinctively extended her arm, allowing him to see the full design clearly. What happened next changed everything. The stranger's entire demeanor shifted as he took in the details of the tattoo. The carefully controlled composure cracked slightly, and Sarah saw something flash across his features. Recognition, followed immediately by surprise, then something that looked like grief. "Where did you get this?" he asked Sarah, his voice suddenly softer, more personal. Sarah felt her throat tighten. She had known this moment might come eventually, had even hoped for it in some ways. But she wasn't prepared for how it would feel. "It was designed for me," she said quietly, 2 years ago. The three boys were looking back and forth between Sarah and the stranger, clearly frustrated that their entertainment had taken an unexpected turn. The Princeton boy tried to regain control of the conversation. "See? She admits it was designed for her. Probably by some tattoo artist who copied it off the internet. Case closed." But the stranger wasn't paying attention to them anymore. His focus was entirely on Sarah, and she could see questions forming in his eyes. Questions she wasn't sure she was ready to answer in front of an audience of strangers and tormentors. "The inscription," he said, pointing to the script that curved beneath the military insignia. "Can you tell me what it says?" Sarah's vision blurred slightly, as emotions she had worked to keep buried came flooding back. The words were in Latin, and she had memorized them perfectly. They were carved into her heart as deeply as they were inked into her skin. "Dolor hic tibi proderit olim," she whispered. The man's face went completely white. He staggered back a step, and Sarah saw his hand instinctively move to his own forearm, where she now noticed the edge of a similar tattoo beneath his rolled sleeve. "This pain will benefit you someday," he translated, his voice barely audible. "It's from Ovid." The cafe had gone completely silent. Even the boys seemed to sense that something significant was happening, though they clearly didn't understand what. Sarah nodded, tears now freely flowing down her cheeks. "It was his favorite quote. He said it helped him get through the difficult times during training, during deployments. He always believed that struggle made people stronger." "His?" the stranger asked, though Sarah could tell from his expression that he was beginning to understand. "My brother's," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "Staff Sergeant Marcus Martinez. He served 3 tours in Afghanistan with the 75th Ranger Regiment before he was selected for Special Operations training." The man closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, Sarah saw that they were bright with unshed tears. Marcus Martinez, he repeated slowly. Dark hair, about 6 feet tall, had a scar on his left hand from a training accident. Sarah's knees went weak. You knew him? I was his commanding officer, the man said quietly. Captain David Chen. Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Marcus served under me for 8 months before... He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Before he died. The words hung unspoken in the air between them. Sarah had heard the official reports, had been told about the operation that went wrong, about the enemy ambush that had taken her brother and 2 other team members. But she had never met anyone who was there, anyone who knew Marcus as a soldier, rather than just as her big brother who used to help her with homework and teach her to drive. The 3 college boys were looking increasingly uncomfortable as they realized their fun had stumbled into something far more serious than they had bargained for. The Princeton boy made one last attempt to salvage the situation. Okay, so maybe her brother was in the military. That still doesn't give her the right to wear his unit's insignia. That's not how it works. Captain Chen turned toward the boy with an expression that made Sarah step back instinctively. The casual authority he had shown before was nothing compared to the controlled fury that radiated from him now. Actually, he said, his voice deadly quiet, that's exactly how it works when the insignia is earned through blood and sacrifice. When it represents a promise made to a fallen warrior by his sister, who watched him struggle through PTSD and survivor's guilt for 2 years before he was killed serving his country. He moved closer to their table, and the boys shrank back despite themselves. You see, that's not just any military tattoo. That specific design, with that particular inscription, was created to honor the memory of one of the finest soldiers I've ever had the privilege to command, a man who died protecting his team and completing a mission that saved countless civilian lives. Sarah watched in amazement as Captain Chen continued, his words precise and devastating. The tattoo was designed by Marcus himself during his last leave, as a way for his sister to carry a piece of his service with her. He showed me the drawings during our final briefing. He was proud that she wanted to honor him that way, proud that she understood what his service meant. The boys were no longer laughing. The cafe had grown so quiet that Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. Other customers were staring openly now, some with tears in their eyes as they began to understand what they were witnessing. So when you mock that tattoo, Captain Chen said, his voice rising slightly, when you call it fake or stolen valor, you're not just insulting a young woman trying to make a living. You're dishonoring the memory of a decorated soldier who gave his life for the freedom that allows you to sit here in your expensive clothes making jokes at the expense of others. The blond boy tried to speak, but Captain Chen held up a hand. I'm not finished. That woman you've been tormenting? She's not trying to steal anything. She's carrying her brother's legacy the only way she can. And that tattoo you've been mocking represents more courage, sacrifice, and honor than the 3 of you have ever shown in your entire lives. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the validation, by finally meeting someone who understood what the tattoo truly meant. But she also felt the familiar weight of grief settling over her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Talking about Marcus always brought back the pain of losing him, the anger at the unfairness of it all, the guilt she carried for being the sister who lived while the hero died. Captain Chen seemed to sense her emotional state. He turned back to her with gentle eyes, the fury he had shown the boys completely gone. Marcus talked about you constantly, he said softly. He was so proud of you. He said you were the strongest person he knew, that you kept the family together while he was deployed, that you never complained even when the worry was eating you alive. Sarah couldn't speak. She had wondered so many times what Marcus had been like as a soldier, whether he had been happy in his unit, whether he had felt appreciated for his service. To hear from his commanding officer that Marcus had spoken of her with pride was both healing and heartbreaking. "There's something else," Captain Chen continued, reaching into his wallet. "Something I've been carrying for 2 years, hoping someday I might have the chance to deliver it personally." Captain Chen pulled out a small, weathered envelope from his wallet, handling it with the kind of care reserved for precious things. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she recognized Marcus's handwriting on the front, her name written in his distinctive script. "He wrote this the night before the mission," Captain Chen explained quietly. "Asked me to make sure you got it if anything happened to him. I've been trying to find you for 2 years, but you'd moved, and the military bureaucracy." He shook his head. "I never stopped looking." Sarah took the envelope with trembling hands. She could feel the weight of folded paper inside, could almost sense her brother's presence emanating from it. Around them, the cafe remained silent, customers and staff alike recognizing they were witnessing something sacred. "You can read it later, in private," Captain Chen said gently. "But he wanted you to know that he understood why you got the tattoo. He said it would help him live forever through you." The 3 college boys had been watching this exchange with growing discomfort, finally beginning to grasp the magnitude of their mistake. The Princeton boy cleared his throat awkwardly. "Look, maybe we should just sit down," Captain Chen commanded without even looking at him. The authority in his voice was absolute, and the boy sank back into his seat immediately. "You started this conversation. Now you're going to finish it properly." He turned to face them fully, and Sarah could see why Marcus had respected this man so much. There was strength in him, but also compassion. The kind of leader who earned loyalty rather than demanded it. "You 3 need to understand something about the world you live in," Captain Chen began, his voice calm but carrying the weight of experience. "Your freedom to sit here, to mock people you don't understand, to live your comfortable lives without fear. That freedom exists because people like Marcus Martinez choose to stand between you and danger." The blond boy shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't know." "You didn't know because you never bothered to ask," Captain Chen interrupted. "You saw something you didn't understand, and instead of showing basic human respect, you chose to mock it. You turned this young woman's grief into entertainment." Sarah clutched the letter closer to her chest, drawing strength from Captain Chen's words. For 2 years, she had endured comments about her tattoo, had learned to hide it or ignore the ignorant assumptions people made. She had never imagined that one day she would find someone who truly understood its significance. Tom, her manager, stepped forward from where he had been quietly observing. As a former Marine, he had recognized something in Captain Chen from the moment he entered. "Gentlemen," Tom said to the boys, his voice respectful but firm, "I think it's time for you to leave." The boy in sunglasses finally found his voice, though it came out as a weak protest. "We're paying customers. You can't just—" "Actually, I can," Tom replied calmly. "This is my establishment, and I don't tolerate harassment of my employees. Your behavior today has been completely unacceptable." Captain Chen reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet again, this time extracting a business card. He handed it to the Princeton boy, who took it with obvious reluctance. "That has my contact information," he said. "I want you to think very carefully about what happened here today. You have an opportunity to learn something important about respect, about sacrifice, and about the impact of your words on others." He paused, letting that sink in before continuing. "I'm going to give you a choice. You can walk out of here having learned nothing, and continue to be the kind of people who mock what they don't understand. Or you can use this as a moment to grow, to become better men than you were when you walked in." The 3 boys sat in uncomfortable silence, clearly struggling with the reality of their situation. They had come in looking for entertainment and found themselves confronted with their own callousness and ignorance. If you choose growth, Captain Chen continued, I suggest you start by apologizing to Sarah, not because I'm making you, but because it's the right thing to do, because she deserves your respect, and because the memory of her brother deserves better than what you've shown today. Sarah watched the internal struggle playing out on their faces. Part of her wanted them to refuse, wanted them to continue being the entitled bullies they had shown themselves to be, because then her anger would have a clear target. But another part of her, the part that Marcus had always tried to nurture, hoped they would find the courage to do better. The Princeton boy was the first to crack. He looked up at Sarah with eyes that now showed genuine remorse rather than smugness. I'm sorry, he said quietly. We were wrong, completely wrong. Your brother, what he did, what you're doing to honor him, we had no right to mock that. The blond boy nodded, his earlier arrogance completely gone. I'm sorry, too. We were being cruel for no reason. Your tattoo is beautiful, and the story behind it. I can't imagine losing my brother like that. The third boy, still wearing his sunglasses despite being indoors, was the last to speak. When he finally pulled off the glasses, Sarah could see that his eyes were red with unshed tears. I don't know what to say except I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. We were wrong, and there's no excuse for how we treated you. Sarah felt the tight knot of anger in her chest beginning to loosen. These weren't evil people, she realized. They were just young and thoughtless, products of privilege who had never been forced to confront real loss or sacrifice. Their apologies felt genuine, and she could see in their faces that the encounter had genuinely affected them. Thank you, she said simply. I accept your apologies. I hope you'll remember this when you encounter things you don't understand in the future. Captain Chen nodded approvingly. Gentlemen, you've taken the first step toward becoming better men. Don't waste it. The boys left quietly, their earlier bravado completely deflated. As the door closed behind them, the normal sounds of the cafe gradually returned. The hiss of the espresso machine, the quiet conversations of other customers, the clink of silverware against plates. Captain Chen turned back to Sarah, his expression soft with understanding. How are you holding up? Sarah wiped away tears she hadn't realized she was still crying. It's been hard, she admitted. Some days the tattoo feels like a comfort, like having him close. Other days it feels like a weight I'm not strong enough to carry. Marcus would be proud of how you've carried it, Captain Chen said with certainty. He used to say that courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about doing the right thing even when you were terrified. You've shown tremendous courage today. Tom approached them with 3 cups of coffee on a tray. These are on the house, he said, setting them down on a nearby table. Captain Sarah, please sit. You both look like you could use a moment. They settled into chairs, and Sarah carefully opened the envelope Marcus had left for her. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in his familiar handwriting. As she read, fresh tears began to flow, but these were different, cleaner somehow, mixed with healing rather than pure grief. He says he knows I'll be angry at him for leaving, she told Captain Chen softly. He says he's sorry for the pain his death will cause, but that he hopes someday I'll understand that some things are worth the sacrifice. He says the tattoo will help keep his memory alive in a way that honors what he stood for, rather than just mourning what was lost. Captain Chen listened quietly, his own eyes bright with emotion. Marcus was wise beyond his years. The night he showed me the tattoo design, he said something I'll never forget. He said that death ends a life, but it doesn't end love. He said the tattoo would be proof that love continues even after the person is gone. Sarah folded the letter carefully, holding it like the treasure it was. Thank you for carrying this for 2 years. Thank you for finding me. I made him a promise, Captain Chen replied. Just like you made him a promise when you got that tattoo. We both kept our word. As the afternoon sun slanted through the cafe windows, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced since Marcus's death. Peace. Not the absence of grief, but the presence of understanding. Her tattoo wasn't a burden she had to carry alone. It was a bridge between her love for her brother and the love others had felt for him too. The mockery from the three boys, which had seemed so devastating an hour ago, now felt like a small thing. She had found something far more valuable than their approval. She had found validation from someone who truly understood what her brother's service meant and what her tattoo represented. Captain Chen reached into his pocket one more time and pulled out a small card. "This is contact information for a support group," he said. "Other family members of fallen Special Operations soldiers. They meet monthly and they understand what you've been going through. Marcus would want you to know that you're not alone." Sarah took the card gratefully. For 2 years, she had felt isolated in her grief, surrounded by people who tried to comfort her but couldn't truly understand the unique pain of losing a brother to military service. The idea of connecting with others who shared that experience felt like another gift from Marcus. "One more thing," Captain Chen said, standing to leave. "Marcus's unit is having a memorial ceremony next month. If you're interested, I'd be honored to escort you. His teammates have been wanting to meet you, to tell you stories about who he was as a soldier." Sarah nodded through her tears, overwhelmed by the generosity of this unexpected connection. "I'd like that very much." As Captain Chen prepared to leave, he paused and looked back at her tattoo one more time. "You know, Marcus was right about one thing. That tattoo does help him live forever. Every time someone sees it and learns the story behind it, his legacy continues. You've become the keeper of something precious." After he left, Sarah returned to work with a lightness she hadn't felt in months. The tattoo on her arm felt different now, not like a weight she carried, but like armor that protected her. She thought about the three boys who had mocked her, and realized she felt grateful to them. Their cruelty had led to something beautiful, had brought her the connection with Captain Chen that she never could have found on her own. The rest of her shift passed quietly, but Sarah noticed that several customers who had witnessed the earlier confrontation went out of their way to be kind to her. Word had spread quickly through the small cafe about what had transpired, and she found herself surrounded by unexpected support and understanding. As she cleaned up at the end of the day, Tom approached her with a gentle smile. "You did good today, Sarah. Marcus would be proud." Sarah rolled down her sleeves, but for the first time in months, it wasn't to hide her tattoo. It was simply because the air conditioning was too cold. Tomorrow, she decided, she would wear short sleeves to work. She was ready to carry her brother's memory openly, with pride rather than shame. The tattoo that had once felt like a secret burden had become what Marcus always intended it to be. A celebration of love that transcends death, a promise kept, and a legacy that would continue for as long as Sarah drew breath to tell the story.